So I wanted to talk about rejection this week, and I did talk about rejection this week, but my mic died, which caused my camera to die. So I talked for an hour and a half at a camera with nothing recording. I was just vibing with myself, and that kind of put me in a reading slump. And it's horrible timing because I just started this and I'm not reading right now. But I thought it might be fun to talk about my reading journey because I feel as if when I watch people who love reading just as much as I do, I feel as if they grew up reading, they loved reading, they did it all the time, and that wasn't necessarily my experience. So I want to talk about my experience and I want to talk about how you can also learn to love to read. To enjoy reading, you don't have to have this history, this deep infatuation with it. You can start at any age and read whatever you want. Growing up, I wasn't super into reading. I loved stories, I loved movies, I loved experiencing them. I loved when my family would read me stories, but I didn't really read that much. I remember going to Barnes& Noble a lot as a kid, and I loved that. I loved being around books, I loved being in libraries, so the love was there. I just didn't do much with it. And then in 3rd grade, I think I had a book report on some Judy B. Judy, and I hated it. And I was like, wow, this is what people are doing when they read. They like this. And then I got assigned to read Matilda, which changed everything. I was obsessed with that book. I remember going to the library with my dad, and I remember getting that book, and I would read it, start over, read it, start over. I was just very, very much in love with that book. And also, I bought a copy for myself for my own little library, and this cover is hideous. I hate books that do this. I don't want this on my book. And the cover is just not as good as the yellow one. And I vividly remember reading Matilda while listening to Selena Gomez and the Scene. 5th grade, there was something called AR testing. I have no idea if they do it anymore, but I remember there was a point system, and you had to pick a goal that you thought you could reasonably achieve. And most people were picking goals of like 10, 7, and for some reason, my overachieving butt picked, I feel it was either 20 or 50. It was an insanely high number for a 12-year-old. I had to read so many books. Well, it felt like a lot of books, but it probably was only 5 or 6. But when you're that age, when all you want to do is go outside and play, that felt like every book on the planet, okay? And I remember reading The Hunger Games, and I remember getting Harry Potter and the Order of Phoenix because it was really long. It was worth a lot of points, and I had no history of Harry Potter, so I was just reading it and I was like, dang, this is crazy. And it was kind of good, but I had no idea what like the context for anything was. I was forced to read so much that I kind of hated it. And in 6th grade, I was put in regular English because when you went to middle school where I lived, that's when they started putting you advanced English and I think more advanced courses. And in 7th grade, my English teacher, he made a big impact on my life. I remember reading The Giver, and I absolutely loved that book. I remember there was this writing competition. I spent so much time and energy writing and researching for that competition, and I think I sucked really bad, but I was just super passionate. I was writing so much in the class, and I was participating so much in the class. It was one of the things that I really looked forward to. And he took me out in the hall because he would take us in the hall and tell us if we were going to regular or advanced English. But anyways, he told me that I was going into advanced English, and I remember being in utter disbelief that someone thought I could handle something like that. I was like, whoa, are you sure? I was just shocked that he thought that I could actually excel in advanced English. And that's where summer reading came about. I thought that they were purposefully torturing me. I hated it, but it always ended up with me liking the book that we were reading, and I ended up actually liking the assignment, but I was such a young teenager then I was like, whatever, I don't even like it. I don't remember 9th grade much, but I do remember in 10th grade, I had to read The Glass Castle, and that book was amazing. And I didn't realize that it was a true story until after I had read it. It just felt such a deep connection to that book. I remember seeing the movie. I couldn't believe that somebody had been through all of these things and wrote about them so well. In 10th grade, I also had been taking AP European History, which I was not recommended for. I was told to not take that class. My counselor or my teacher just didn't think it was a good fit, but I really wanted to prove them wrong, and I proved them right. It was a bad year for me, so I was really, really struggling in that course, and I didn't quite understand what AP courses were. Taking an AP course when you don't really know what an AP course is a really hard hurdle to overcome, and I felt very disconnected from my peers. I felt really stupid. I genuinely felt that I was the dumbest person on the planet, but this amazing thing happens that every time I'm put up to a challenge, at the end of it, after it's done, I always end up kind of liking it because AP European history was very, very interesting to me. It's just at the time, it wasn't a good time for me to be taking that hard of a course. So I was really nervous going into 11th grade, and the next level of English wasn't advanced. It was AP English, and I said, no, I'm going to take regular. And I was taking regular English, and it was the first week or two. And I remember being so understimulated and so bored because English was a class that I really poured all of my energy and efforts into. And I remember my 11th grade English teacher, who I also had as a freshman, she came over to me. She was essentially trying to convince me to go into AP Lang, and I was really nervous. And she essentially was like, you know where you're supposed to be, and it's in AP Lang. And I eventually switched, and I did not know what I was in for. It was one of the most difficult courses I ever took in high school. I remember being constantly busy. I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't do extracurriculars. I do not know how people did AP courses and other things. Amazing. Could not be me. The imposter syndrome that I felt in my AP Euro class, it was becoming amplified by the nth degree because I felt so stupid, so insecure. Every time we had discussions, I never thought that I was saying something smart enough or that I was saying something worthy of being said because it felt as if everybody was understanding it but me. The reality was I was putting so much pressure to say the perfect thing at the perfect time in the perfect way that I didn't have any confidence in myself. Every time I spoke, it felt awful. I felt as if I had embarrassed myself, even though my teacher wasn't laughing at me. My peers weren't laughing at me. I was laughing at me. And I remember we read The Great Gatsby, and I really, really, really loved that book at the time. I was really grateful that my English teacher had pushed me to take that course because AP Lang at my school was notoriously known for being one of the hardest courses. And I also had been taking psychology that year. And in my senior year, I took AP Psychology, which was basically psychology with more work, and I loved it. And I opted out of AP English. I was like, that was awesome. AP Lang was awesome, but AP Literature, no. And again, my English teacher tried to convince me to go into AP Literature, and I was like, no, this year I'm taking a break. I was exhausted. I needed to focus on writing stuff for college, and I didn't care. I made that choice for myself, and I am so grateful I did because it changed how I viewed reading completely. It was amazing. I think 12th grade was the first time I got to enjoy reading for myself. I think we just had to write a review about it with specific requirements, but that piece of cake compared to everything I had done. And the books I read were Brain on Fire. It's kind of a funny story. This Is Where It Ends, The Girl on the Train, One of Us is Lying, and All the Bright Places. And let me tell you something, okay? When I was 14, I read The Fault in Our Stars, which is unironically one of my favorite books of all time. I love John Green. I like books that make me cry. I like books that hurt my feelings. And when I read All the Bright Places, I cried so hard. That book broke me. And now that book, I could guess the ending and I probably wouldn't care as much, but I was a teenager, and that's exactly what I should have been reading as a teenager. And I loved it. It became one of my favorite books, and I carried it through the years and marked it as one of my favorite books. I would tell people about that book. So then I went to college, and I had an assigned reading for one of my English courses, and it was Evicted: Poverty and Profit in American Cities by Matthew Desmond. And that book made me realize something. I really love sociology books. Such an educational read, and it made me learn a lot of things and made me see where I was going to school a lot differently. In high school, obviously, I talked about that I had no confidence. I had no faith in myself. And my grades in my English courses, though my English teachers were pushing me, I didn't get amazing grades, okay? They graded harshly because it was a college level course or it was an advanced course, and I wasn't the best. They were trying to prepare us for what it was going to be like in college. And when I went to college, I had these insanely high standards for my assignments. I remember my professors thought I was awesome. They thought I was so good at writing. They thought I was so good at analysis. And it took my breath away because for so long, I had felt stupid. I had felt so insecure. And I felt that I understood nothing. And they completely shifted how I saw that. And it gave me a newfound confidence that I did not have before. And then I also took another English course where I swear to God, we read 11 or 12 books all about Treasure Island. I cannot look at that book ever again. And then I switched my major from cinema to psychology in my sophomore year, and I got a minor in sociology. I took a course called Sociology of Adolescence, where we basically talked about systemic structures, different cultures, and how they affect adolescence. We read a book called White Kids Growing Up with Privilege in a Racially Divided America, and that was a book that was similar to Evicted. I loved reading studies, essentially. I loved reading different experiences, and they all had a purpose to teach me something. And I didn't think that I liked nonfiction, but I do. I could not recommend White Kids more to anybody. It was such a fantastic read, and it taught me so many things. When I was in college, I was extremely busy and I had a lot to do, so I didn't have a lot of time to be reading. And in 2023, that's when I began to pick up reading again. The summer of 2023, I was really, really going through it. And I just could not find enjoyment through anything. I didn't want to talk to my friends. I didn't want to play video games. I didn't want to do anything. And the only thing that I could do was go to my local library and get a book. And I just picked one out and took it home and read the whole day, finished it, went back to the library, picked up another one, came home, read it. And I'm going to talk about some of the books that I read during that time because they marked a really important chapter in my life. Drowning by T.J. Newman. Hey, do you remember when that submersible imploded? This book was written before that, but I thought that she had written an inspiration of that because it was so incredibly similar. Highly recommend that book. It reads like a movie. It is so good. Every time I've recommended it to somebody, they finish it within the day. Even the slowest readers I know have finished it within the day. It is amazing. I also read You'd Be Home Now by Kathleen Glasgow. I read Really Good, actually. And a lot of people don't like that book, but at the time, I really needed that book, and I had never felt more comforted. I read a thriller called The Chain, and then I read They Never Learn, and that book was really good. And then my final semester of school started, and I wasn't reading a lot. I was so exhausted when I was in school that there was just no way to also read on top of that, so I would listen to audiobooks sometimes, and these books also marked a really big chapter in my life. And I listened to I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, and I sobbed on my 23rd birthday. I also listened to I'm Thinking of Ending Things, where I accidentally spoiled it, which I thought would have been a really cool experience to read without the spoiler, because the story is really unnerving and it's really cool, and I highly recommend reading it near winter or the end of fall, late fall. It's really cool. The movie is don't watch the movie. Or if you're gonna watch the movie, read the book first. It's like you have to read the book so that you know what they were trying to do. Because otherwise you're just gonna think it sucks. So then I graduated college, and 2024, I finally had time in my life where I could just read. This was the year I started to really, really read. I was reading a lot. So I read Ocean at the End of the Lane and Coraline by Neil Gaiman. And let me say, the old illustrations of Coraline are terrifying. I read The Unhoneymooners, which I think was the first book that I read on my Kindle. We drove an hour and a half to go get my Kindle because nobody in the vicinity had one. And during this time, I was starting to read a lot of books from, I guess, Book Talk or BookTube, books that were popular. I read a lot of books that I was familiar with or books that I had heard of because I didn't know what to read, and I had ideas of what I liked to read. So if they sounded kind of interesting or popular, I would read them because I thought I might like them. That worked sometimes, but not all the time. So I read The Unhoneymooners, and it wasn't great, but it was fun. It was a fun summer book. I read If He Had Been With Me, which was arguably one of the worst books I've ever read. That book sucks, and if you think it's good, you're lying. Unless you're a teenager and you like that book, then I can excuse that. But that book sucked. That book sucked so bad. I reread The Fault in Our Stars with my boyfriend. We started our own little book club when we started dating. Cried my eyes out again. I read The Loop by Ben Oliver. I really love dystopian novels, and this book does not get enough attention. I want to make a video just on this book. I need to reread it, and I need to read the second one and the third one. The fact that it hasn't blown up, or it isn't an insane best-selling novel, or there isn't a movie made about it, is beyond me. Is beyond me, dude. I read Me Before You and I cried my eyes out again. As I said, I like books that make me cry. I read Shady Hollow. Wasn't a fan. I like the idea, but wasn't a fan. I read The Hunger Games. I read Hidden Pictures. And I read The Housemaid by Frida McFadden. And before you say anything, Frida McFadden was a big author for me at this time. You either like her or you hate her. There's no in between. A lot of people read her books to get out of reading slumps, which was what I notoriously did with her books. And when I read The Housemaid, I hadn't had a lot of reading experience. The book genuinely was scary to me at times, and I thought it was good. I thought it was good. It was a good time. And when I saw people hitting on it so harshly, I didn't understand, but I can understand now, 2 years later, after reading a lot more. But I still think it's a fun book. I think Frida McFadden books can just be like a whatever read. It's like fast food. You can't have it all the time, but when you have it, it's really good. It's not good for you, but you have a good time and you enjoy it. So that's all that really matters. I remember being really, really shocked by the end of the book. Really liked plot twists too, and I think it was wholesome. Like, I hadn't read a lot, so this book that had a probably very obvious plot twist, I was like, oh my god, that's crazy, oh my god, but it was good. It was good. I got my Nana into Frida McFadden, and she obsessively read, I think, every book she's written now. And then 2025 came along, and this is when I actually started to expand my taste a little bit. So I was getting really into the Hunger Games. I really, really love the Hunger Games. So I read Catching Fire, loved, read Mockingjay, hated that. And then I read Perks of Being a Wallflower. Oh my god, Perks of Being a Wallflower is one of my favorite movies of all time. Never read it until 2025. Sobbed my eyes out because I read the version that has the most updated last letter from Charlie. Hey, I read this book called Beta. I like science fiction, and it was really good until the end. And there was some weird, like, self-inputs from the author. It was just too much. I read Twilight, as I talked about. I was reading books that I was very comfortable with. I read Paper Towns. I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Oh my god, I don't know why it took me so long to read that book. I really, really loved it. And then I read The Mad Wife by Megan Church. Also, nobody has talked about. The book is very well written, and I really loved the atmosphere of that book. And that book made me start to take a slight pivot on what I was reading. I started to fall more in love with stories that surrounded women, women's mental health, women's experiences. And the 1950s vibe of that book was really, really good. I didn't like the ending, but I still recommend the book nonetheless. I also read My Dark Vanessa, and that book is very personal to me. I really, really love and care about that book. It's just personal to me. If you know, you know. And if you don't, don't. So after reading The Mad Wife and My Dark Vanessa, I started to get more and more interested in stories about women. And this year I read Nobody's Girl by Virginia Giuffre. I read Half His Age by Jeanette McCurdy, and I wasn't a fan of that. I was disappointed by that book. I also read Sunrise on the Reaping, which was heartbreaking. I kind of blacked out after reading that because it was so much and I cried so hard, and I love that book, and I'm going to have to read it before the movie comes out, so I'll probably have to re-experience that all over again. Yes! And then I read The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna, and holy guacamole, I loved that book. The ending, but the book, man. Kristen Hanna can write a book. I have The Nightingale on my shelf right now, and it's been staring at me for months. My mom and I bought it, and I'm scared. People say that they cry really, really hard reading that book, so I'm mentally preparing for that. And the book is very long, and her books are very immersive, I would like to say. So if I'm going to read a Kristen Hanna book, I have to be really ready to sink my teeth into it. But yeah, that was kind of my reading journey from adolescence, and my tastes have shifted a lot since when I first started reading. Obviously, that's normal. That's exactly what you want. The more I read, the more I wanted to experience, and I couldn't read as fast as I would find new books to read. When I started reading as an adult, I read very popular books or books that I was familiar with because I wasn't sure what to look for. And honestly, playing that game was a safe bet because I would keep trying to read things that were popular, and some of them were great and some of them were horrible. And I had to stop relying on the book side of internet and eventually just start looking for things that I would find enjoyable. Or I would just walk into a bookstore or a library and just look at books, take them at face value, take them home, read them, and if I like them, I like them. If I don't, I don't. I try not to read reviews anymore on books because I don't think that gives the book a fair chance. I will get this idea of what that book is in my head, and while I read it, I'm looking for things that either make it the best book I've ever read, or the worst book I've ever read, or the most mediocre book I've ever read, and rather than just experiencing it myself. And that's honestly what has made reading more enjoyable, is just letting it ride. Looking at books, seeing what's interesting, and just reading it, trying it out, trying new things. I cannot read the same thing over and over again. It is impossible. If I read one genre of book, I have to go all the way to the opposite side of the spectrum. I cannot read the same thing over and over again. And if you want to start reading more, or if you have never been a reader, there is a place for you. There is a book for everybody that is waiting for you to go find it. And your experience to finding those books that you love and adore is one of the most beautiful, because it is this extremely personal thing. I read a lot when I wasn't in a great place or I felt really alone, so reading has become very personal for me. It's hard for me to read in front of other people. I have like a reading sanctuary, which is this chair. I take it really seriously. I'm a very immersive reader. I have the music that would match the book. I have a candle that matches the book. I have to read things in the right season. I just really care about giving the book my full attention and having my experience with the book almost be a lived experience. I will always remember associating it with these songs or this candle or this weather, and you don't have to do that. If you like to read at a coffee shop, if you like to read at a library, if you like to read at a bookstore, if you like to read on your way to work, whatever it is, freaking do it, man. And I think there's also this thing that happens when you start reading, and I don't know if it's because of the book side of internet, but you read things that you think you're supposed to be reading. I used to always think that I needed to be reading romantasy or nonfiction or classics, and I'm not saying that I don't like those things. It's just I tried really, really hard to like those things when I don't think I was ready to like them, or didn't give myself a chance to go looking for them myself, because I would go into things thinking that I would really like them, and they were actually the worst book I'd ever read. So I don't recommend doing that, but I do recommend maybe starting with things that you are familiar with, things that maybe you already know the story of, and see if you enjoy that. And reading things that you're familiar with is actually a great way to step into reading. Even if you've already seen the movie, reading the book can give you this easy introduction to reading, and it's very, you know what's going on, you feel comfortable. And I personally like to reread things. I like to rewatch things. Reading the Twilight series, I haven't finished it. I'm only on Eclipse. I'm almost done with it though. I realized that I really enjoy books with vampires. So now I'm more open to books with vampires because I'm really into that genre of fantasy. Overall, if you want to read, if you want to read more, if you're already reading, if you're putting this weird pressure on yourself to read a certain kind of book or read something that you don't think you'd be fully interested in, let's just stop, okay? I think it's just really important to remember that books are just for fun. It is just for fun. It's just like movies, it's just like games. Does it take a little bit more effort than movies and games? Yes, but it's so good for you. Just reading one book a year is a huge feat because a lot of people aren't reading these days. I don't know the exact statistic, but it's not a good statistic. So even just thinking about reading and trying to go to your local library to take a peek, or go to your local bookstore to look around, you get to learn a lot about yourself when you start reading. You get to learn things about yourself that you may have not learned in any other aspect of your life. I hope that I've given you something to think about, giving you a chance to think about your reading journey. If there's anything that you've learned from this, is that being a reader doesn't look one way, and maybe this is just something that I've experienced, but you don't have to read obsessively to be a reader. You don't have to be somebody that grew up right from the womb reading books, never left them. You can be a reader if you just like to read fiction. You can be a reader if all you like to read are classics. You can be a reader if all you like to do is read one book on your vacation in the summer. So don't put pressure on reading. Reading is supposed to be fun. And from this point going forward, I'm going to try to read something before next week because I'm trying to do one video a week. And before I go, one more thing. Do not be scared to DNF a book. If you do not like the book you are reading, you do not have to finish it. It doesn't matter if you have 10 pages left of that book. You do not have to finish it. I have tortured myself enough, and there is enough books to read that you will enjoy way more than whatever you're reading. Put it down. Go look at new ones. And if you've made it this far, hi! Thank you. I want to hear what your favorite book is, or a book that you have such a fond memory with. I would love, 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 love to hear about it. I love people's experiences when it comes to that stuff. So please do not hesitate to talk about your favorite book down below. Okay. Bye.